Today is about communication. There is a lot of communication going on in this channel, even though it's rather one-sided, but at least I'm talking to you a lot. A communication psychologist might probably say, I am the sender, you are the receiver, and I'm sending you messages. What kind of messages am I sending? Well, frequently messages like, you can use the red button to subscribe to the channel. And this seems to be a rather simple and straightforward statement, but there might be more to it than meets the eye. We will use the communication square by Friedemann Schulz von Thun to figure it out. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today we'll talk about communication. In Germany, if you talk about communication, Friedemann Schulz von Thun is quite an important name. Schulz von Thun is a famous psychologist and he is most well known for a model that is called the facets model or the communication square. I did a nice and colorful visualization here. The colors don't actually matter in the book. All the images are black and white. Now, what's the point of this communication square? Schulz von Thun says that each message, each piece of communication has 4 different sides, contains 4 different aspects. Let's give this a try. When I say to you that the red button can be used to subscribe to the channel, there is some factual information in this statement. And it's even true because the button is really there and it has the described function. This factual information aspect is often focused on, even though the discussion is actually about something else, like in this case, because each message also contains some kind of appeal. In this case, obviously, what I actually mean is please subscribe to the channel. But there is more. Each message also contains some self-revelation, because if I talk to you, my communication, my messages reveal a bit about myself. In this case, the message probably reveals that I would like to have more subscribers. Or on a deeper level, maybe that I would like some affirmation. Last but not least, there is an relationship aspect to each message. When I talk to someone, my communication shows what I think about that person and how I feel about my relationship to that person. Now, this might be a bit difficult for the red button example, because here I'm not talking to a specific person, but to an anonymous crowd. However, there still is a relationship aspect in this message. Think about it. I could also say, go on, you click subscribe right now. And after that, go watch my other videos. Don't forget the likes. Hurry up. Or I could say, would you kindly consider subscribing to my channel if it's not a bother to you, please? So even in this anonymous message, there still is a relationship aspect. So each message contains those 4 aspects. Now, how did they get in there? This is quite an important question because this is the cause for a lot of problems and misunderstandings. Schulz von Thun says each of us has 4 beaks. 1 beak for each of those aspects. A factual information beak, an appeal beak, a relationship beak, and a self-revelation beak. So each time we talk to someone, each time we communicate, we send those 4 different kinds of information, of messages at once. The different beaks can have different sizes. Maybe one is a bit smaller, one is a bit bigger, one is more or less developed. Somebody who doesn't feel easy talking about himself, who doesn't like to reveal anything about himself, probably has a smaller self-revelation beak. Someone who tends to order people around and tends to have a commanding tone probably has a bigger appeal beak. Now, in the same way that the sender has those 4 beaks, the receiver has 4 different ears. 1 ear for each of those 4 aspects of communication. And just as for the beaks, those ears are sometimes a bit bigger, sometimes a bit smaller, more or less developed. Someone who easily feels offended, who tends to find criticism in what others consider harmful statements, probably has a bigger relationship ear. So he listens for hidden criticism, hidden accusations in what people say more intensely. So we don't just have these 4 aspects in our communication, in our messages. The message that the sender sends using his 4 beaks might be quite different from the message the receiver hears through his 4 ears. For that, Schulz von Thun provides an example. A married couple is having lunch. The wife did the cooking, and the husband says, "What are the green thingies in the soup?" The wife reacts offended. She says, "If you don't like my cooking, do it yourself next time." Now let's have a look at what the messages might look like for the people involved. I guess they both agreed on the factual information, which probably is there is something green in the soup. Now, the self-revelation from the husband's point of view probably might have just been, "I don't know this, I'm curious about it." Relationship, "You will probably know." Appeal, "Please tell me." However, from the wife's point of view, it probably sounded like, "I don't like this." "You are a lousy cook." "I don't want any experiments in my soup." And she reacted accordingly. Next week, we will take a closer look at some communication problems using the communication square, because each of those 4 aspects, each of those 4 sides has its own problems, and we will take a look at that. The communication square is quite a useful tool to better understand communication and to understand communication problems. However, it does have its limits, and it's important to know them. For starters, as you might have already noticed in my description before, the relationship aspect actually contains 2 sub-aspects. There is one part, how I see the person I talk to, what image I have of him. And the other part is how I see the relationship we have. If a superior says to his employee, aren't the documents done yet? There is the part about the other person is probably you are lazy, I can't rely on you, and the part about the relationship is probably something like I am your boss, you have to do what I say. So keep in mind that for the relationship aspects you might need to further distinguish between those two sub-aspects. Keep that in mind. Furthermore, very important thing, the communication square is usually visualized like this, as a square with 4 sides, obviously. And what people also like to do, have a look, is to write the message into the middle of the square and to write the interpretations for the different aspects around the square. Now, these ways to visualize the communication square put a lot of focus on the actual words that are said. However, when you look at communication, you always have to take all verbal and non-verbal aspects into account. For example, the tone of voice is very important. The way the speaker emphasizes some words is very important as well. His face, his gestures, his body language, all of that are very important aspects of communication that contain a lot of meaning, a lot of information, sometimes more than the words themselves. Without those additional aspects, communication would be quite complicated. Think back to the example we just had. What are the green thingies in the soup? In real life, there will hardly ever be a misunderstanding there, because the way the husband says those words will usually clearly indicate to the wife whether they are meant in a negative way, depending on whether he says, "Oh, what are those green thingies?" or, "Oh, what are the green thingies in the soup?" So those aspects are very important. Always keep in mind, even if you have a visualization that focuses on the words, that you need to look at all aspects of communication. Now, finally, the communication square has a kind of blind spot because it only analyzes what is being said, what is being communicated, but sometimes what is not said is most important. Schulz von Thun provides an example for that. A married couple is sitting at the breakfast table. The husband just came into the room and sat down, and he says to his wife, "Oh, did you call our daughter's teacher yet?" And we could analyze this message using the communication square. However, in this situation, this message is actually not very important. The important thing is that this couple on this day has their wedding anniversary, and the wife expected to receive congratulations from the husband. However, this didn't happen. So for the wife, the fact that the congratulations didn't occur is probably a kind of message in itself that we can analyze using the square. It would probably go something like factual information. Today is a day just like any other. Self-revelation, I forgot about it because I don't care much. Relationship, I don't care about you that much, and I don't care about our marriage. And appeal, Please let us do business as usual today. Let's pretend it is a normal day. So in this situation, the important thing is what is not said and what is expected to be said. So this is another thing you need to keep in mind. Obviously, wedding anniversary is just once a year, but on a smaller scale, almost every conversation has some expectations from the different participants, how the other participants should behave, what they should say, what they should do, and if those expectations are neglected, this might be significant in itself and might even be a message in itself. So keep this in mind as well. Now you might also wonder, now that I know about this communication square, what can I derive from that for my everyday communication? How can I improve my communication so less problems occur in the first place? Now, first of all, the communication square helps to sensitize us to the different aspects of communication. For example, a realization that I find to be quite important is to understand that the message we hear as a receiver is to a large extent of our own making, that it is based on our own interpretation, that is based on our own experiences. So we need to understand that even as a receiver, we have an active part in the conversation, and that we need to take responsibility for that and understand that. Furthermore, the communication square, the understanding of those four aspects, can help us to develop our communication skills. As I said, some of the beaks are bigger or smaller, some of the ears are bigger or smaller as well. Let's say now that you know about the four aspects, you realize that your relationship ear isn't very big and that you tend to overhear relationship messages, and therefore people around you sometimes feel not understood or not understood. And now that you know that, you can try to focus on relationship messages and learn to better hear them and to grow a bigger relationship ear. Schulz von Thun himself states that it's not his intention to put people into a proper formal communication suit as a figure of speech. So he doesn't want people to sit in a communication and say, oh, what should I say according to the rules so this goes well? For him, coherence is most important. And coherence means that we are true to ourselves and true to the situation, that we are authentic in communication, that we don't try to put up appearances or don't try to be someone else. And true to the situation means that we realize what kind of communication the situation requires and act accordingly. For example, if we have a relaxed dinner with some friends, this requires a different kind of communication than holding a presentation in an important business meeting. Now, some of you might say, yeah, all right, sensitizing and coherence, but this is all rather vague. I would rather have specific advice. What should I do so my communication turns out fine? However, This idea pretty much takes us away from coherence and from an authentic appearance in communication, because if we try to follow the good advice of some psychologist or some expert, we aren't ourselves in that moment, but we merely try to fake the good behavior. And furthermore, if we start saying, well, what do I have to do in a conversation so everybody likes me and people do what I want, we get deep into the area of manipulation, and that is obviously the contradiction to good and healthy communication. This is the direction you have in some business communication trainings, especially for managers, where you get strange advice such as, oh, you should you should start the discussion with some small talk so your employee thinks you respect him and see him as an actual human, that idiot. Yeah, this is not the direction we want to take. Personally, I think the most important lesson we can learn from the communication square is that communication is not an abstract thing, is not detached, is not purely objective. If we have a conversation, all the feelings and opinions and attitudes we have regarding this conversation, they will be part of the conversation. They will appear in the conversation. So before we have an important discussion, important meeting, we should ask ourselves, what is my opinion of those people I will talk to? What is my attitude toward the topic? What feelings do I have about this whole thing, about the whole meeting? And we should try to get into this with a positive attitude. Schulz von Thun developed the communication square in the 60s, and he first described it in his book that was published in 1981. That is, as I said, unfortunately not available in English. No, I didn't say before, but it still isn't. Yeah. Unfortunately, there is no English translation available. In the years after he published this first book, Schulz von Thun further developed his theories, and he added further models and tools to his toolbox. And I will show you some more of that in the future. Next week we will talk about communication problems, again using the communication square. This will be pretty interesting. If you already recall some conversation that went wrong, and now that you know the communication square, it suddenly makes sense, please let me know in the comments. And of course, I appreciate your feedback about the video. Regarding the red button, you know what to do. Keep in mind, I need the affirmation. You might also want to massage my ego by giving the video a thumbs up. We'll see each other next week. Until then, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.